welcome to the stage Executive Vice President, Religious Freedom Institute, Eric Patterson.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be with you here where we're all united in championing religious freedom for everyone, everywhere. I'd like to introduce you to this next panel, four distinguished public servants. Let me start with first Zeenat Rahman, the project director of the Aspen Institute's Inclusive America Project. Also joining us is Farhan Latif, the president of the El Hibri Foundation. Our next panelist is the Vice President for Global Operations at the Institute for Global Engagement, James Chen. And finally, the president and the founder of Hardwired Global, Tina Ramirez. Now, as you know, this panel is about covenantal pluralism as an approach to championing religious freedom globally. And in a moment, we'll ask each of our panelists to say something about covenantal pluralism as they understand it, and then later hear from them about how their organizations are actually taking action on the ground. Let me say, for my organization, the Religious Freedom Institute, that we think about covenantal pluralism as the definition that we've heard Chris Seipel, one of our friends, talk about different groups with different beliefs and different actions, different behaviors, nonetheless committing to mutual respect and engagement within their society. And this is consonant with our mission at the Religious Freedom Institute. Our mission is to achieve broad acceptance of religious freedom as a fundamental human right, as a source of individual and societal flourishing, as a foundation or a cornerstone for successful society, and as a driver for international and national security. So let me turn it over to our panelists, and we'll start with Zeenat, and then we'll work down. Would you tell our audience how you and your organization understand covenantal pluralism?
Sure. Good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad that you came back after lunch to be with us. I was a little worried. As I think about the covenantal pluralism framework, I think that one thing it does very well is that it acknowledges reality on the ground. Those realities are that religious diversity is a fact. It's not going anywhere, it is growing, and it's something that we have to work with. The second is that whoever is a majority somewhere is a minority somewhere else, and I think that just beautifully points to our interdependence as humanity. And I think it's important to have a framework to engage that. And the third, which I don't need to tell this crowd, but which I think is important to state, is that we believe at the Aspen Institute and the Inclusive America Project that religion is a force for good in the world. Our eyes are not closed to the ways that religion has been used for negative ways, but we think that religion is a positive and pro-social force, as does the Templeton Religion Trust. And their definition of covenantal pluralism resonates because I think it is for builders. You know, I think there is a role to play for people to call out atrocities and publish reports about that. But I think covenantal pluralism affords a framework that centers relationship building, that also acknowledges difference. And so it's not syncretism, it is not, you know, interfaith lowest common denominator. It is saying that we have many difficult differences, but the only way that I will have respect for the things that I believe in the world is if I give you mutual respect and understanding. And I think it's a framework that could be very powerful because clearly when you look at the big challenges we have to solve for in the world, we're not gonna just be able to solve them with, you know, those who share the same faith as us or the same ideology as us. And so I think it's just a powerful way to think about how we engage other people in the world, driven by something that's important to most of us, which is our faith.
Thank you for having me on this panel, and thank you, Templeton Religion Trust organizers, International Religious Freedom supporters for affording us the opportunity to be at this panel and not to be on Zoom again. At the foundation, we operate within the framework that how do we build an inclusive America by advancing peace and respect for diversity inspired by the universally shared values of Islam. And we do so by investing in building American Muslim civil society and social sector, investing in organizations and leaders, in partnership with allies to build a more inclusive society and in a society where people can thrive, contribute, and build a greater social fabric. So there are many elements of covenantal pluralism that resonate, with us, and I think at the crux of it, it is looking at the issue of difference that exists within different religious groups, but also difference that exist within a faith tradition itself, and how do you use that difference for constructive cooperation and engagement. And as Zeenat also stated, and the video talked about, diversity is a fact, it exists, but without engagement, it does not lead to a pluralistic society. And from our vantage point, the real heavy lift happens by individual social sector leaders, faith leaders, working towards common cause. And if philanthropy can support that, amplify that, scale that, then we see a better society. So that's our perspective.
Yeah, thank you. For us, covenantal pluralism, when the Templeton Religion Trust started to introduce this concept, we felt that it was really great because religious freedom, we see it as, most of us perceive it as a right. Covenantal pluralism can be seen as an ideal end state. What are you working towards? And when we're engaging with different partners overseas, with governments or with religious leaders, talking about covenantal pluralism, about how different communities speak up for one another, engage with each other, build relationships with each other. That's what we're hopefully working towards, as opposed to just saying, you have to have religious freedom because that's the right thing to do. If we say, these concepts of covenantal pluralism, that's something I think most governments and most countries would want to, would buy into. So that's proven to be very helpful for us.
Well, I just want to thank the Templeton Religion Trust as well for their support of the work that we've done around the world and really embodying their support for this idea of covenantal pluralism. My organization, Hardwired, was founded on the idea that this freedom of speech, of conscience, of belief, and the differences of opinion that people have within that space, that these are essential qualities for how we are. We like to say it's how we're hardwired, this innate impulse to be free, to have those differences, and yet in societies where it doesn't exist, we see chaos. So for us, we believe that really covenantal pluralism is at the heart of what we do, and we believe that differences of opinion can be aspects that can create vibrant discussions rather than flashpoints of conflict. So whereas most people will look at those differences and think conflict, we think let's get in there and let's help people within their differences find space to live and respect one another. And it really compels, I think, each one of us to reach beyond tolerance, to really embody a mutual respect and understanding for the other, for their dignity, for their value as human beings, and to create societies that respect that. So that's really what Hardwired is all about.
So we've talked a little bit about ideas, so let's talk about practice. What is a program or an activity where your organization has seen fruit on the ground? I'll say for the Religious Freedom Institute, an example of our on-the-ground work that tries to advance religious liberty is our work in the Middle East, particularly in Iraq, where over the next 18 months, thousands of college students will go through a program that's about pluralism and tolerance and recognizing not just the rich religious diversity of the country, but how that's a benefit to all of the citizens in the country. It's a sacred trust that proceeds throughout history in Iraq. It's something to be treasured, not something to be destroyed. How about for you?
So there's a few things I want to say. One is just, I've been toying with the idea of like, what does it mean to have covenant with one another, right? And obviously there's a religious connotation, but the idea of beyond a promise, it's a pact. And I think where our work sits with the Inclusive America Project at the Aspen Institute, it's really around like, what is the relationship between citizen to citizen, and how do you build the capacity of faith leaders and other social sector leaders, as Farhan said, to find their common ground and do good in the world. But we do it around really difficult issues. And so, we just had a multi-sectoral roundtable around religious freedom, where we had, folks from all different orientations on religious freedom. But we think that there are not enough spaces and places where people can actually have those difficult conversations. And we get messy and we do it, and I think that in that way we see our role as helping to build kind of the scaffolding or the infrastructure for that engagement between leaders, which, there are many examples of at the summit. We just saw 2 on stage, but, that we need more of that, and we need everybody to kind of have an understanding and orientation of that. And then one more word, which is the role of philanthropy, is critical. And Templeton's playing a special role, because Templeton Religion Trust, because many times funders, through their grant making, they implicitly convey a theory of change and or like a slant to their philanthropy. By putting together a covenantal pluralism framework and then introducing it through their own way, so not just through their grantees, which I think we all represent that, but saying this is actually important for philanthropy to consider, has been a really big help to us at Aspen, because we convene different members of different funders, different people from foundations, to have those conversations around what does pluralism mean, where are the hard lines, et cetera.
Thanks.
We sit in an exciting spot to see some of the most exciting things in society come together on this. Last year, or earlier this year, I remember walking into one of the largest mosques here in the DMV area, Adams Center. Imam Majid was just here on stage. And to walk inside, and you would expect people to be praying and the usual activity, but to see healthcare workers administering vaccines, and to see it becoming a testing site. And we see this in our networks across the nation in this last year. Gurdwaras, mosques, synagogues, churches, becoming centers responding to the crisis from the last year. That is covenantal pluralism in action. And supporting that, amplifying that, is part of what we see this work in action. And it goes back to, Sir Templeton said this, and we find this in the Quran as well, which is competing to do good. That's the manifestation of that. We see projects like Zeenat, the Aspen Inclusive America Project, and seeing the work there, Multi-Faith Neighbors Network, Pastor Bob and Imam Majid, Rabbi Saperstein. These are the great projects that I think really epitomize covenantal pluralism in action.
So for IGE, the way covenantal pluralism plays into our work is that, first and foremost, we try to model it. So we are an evangelical Christian organization, but we work for the freedom of religion and belief conscience for all groups. And whenever we engage in a country, we specifically engage whatever the majority faith or group in that country is. So, if it's in Myanmar, it's with Buddhists. If it's in Uzbekistan, it's with Muslims or the government. And sometimes that, it brings questions to many of our, supporters, our donor base. But if you want to change to be sustainable, you'll have to have complete buy-in from the majority, as well as the minority that you're trying to help. And ultimately, we believe that covenantal pluralism will benefit the entire country and all the people. It'll lead to a flourishing state, developing economy, and all sorts of beneficial outcomes. So we try to involve both majorities and minorities and to build trust between them.
So in the field of education, our programs are really cultivating a culture of covenantal pluralism in the schools and in the classrooms. In Iraq, as many of you know, children across northern Iraq were brainwashed by ISIS and taught to hate and kill people of different beliefs, and those children remain there. And the rich historical diversity that was Iraq, I've been all over the country and I've seen it firsthand, is really at risk. Teachers that are returning to those areas are very concerned for their children. Children that remained under ISIS and the ones that are refugees that are returning are having a lot of conflict. They want to break the cycle of conflict and overcome the hate and the intolerance that led to that, but they don't know how. And so that's why the Templeton-funded project that we're doing in northern Iraq to train teachers to overcome the bias and the misconceptions and the fear that children have of one another is able to occur, so that they have the tools and the resources to really embody covenantal pluralism, which is to learn to respect the differences and the dignity of one another, especially those with whom they disagree. And as I said before, our goal is never to get them to always agree with one another. It's actually just to find a place of respect and dignity in their differences.
So last question for the panel, and it's a question we heard on the last panel, and it has to do with the future. Naysayers would say a big meeting like this, what is this doing? Is there really hope for a change in our world when it comes to religious freedom, when it comes to covenantal pluralism? What are you optimistic about? One of the things I'm optimistic about is the fact that people are uniting across denominational and religious lines, and that it is not simply the old guard in a sense, but that there's a mobilization of young people who believe in this. That, to me, is a sign for a lot of hope. How about for the rest of you?
I think I'm always optimistic when I get closest to the people who are doing the work. So when I'm with the faith leaders on the ground grappling with these issues every day, there's a proverb that says, like, plant a seed even if you won't enjoy, plant the seed of a tree even if you won't enjoy its shade. And so I think I'm optimistic, but I also think all of us have a responsibility to do, not just to talk or not just to write, but to do something in the world. And so many of us have concerns that are global and important and all of that, but also what are we doing with our neighbors? So try to keep it very kind of pragmatic and front and center. What are we all doing to build? And I think that's what I would put out to the audience is, how are you all building? And we all have enormous privilege by being in this room. And I think the connections that happen between people here show that there is meaning to us all being together and just appreciating that coming out of a pandemic. But I think I'm very optimistic about all of the good stories you hear coming out of that, and alongside the fact that it's not enough to just do good. We actually have a mandate, because the people who would want to see a non-pluralistic world, see a non-pluralistic environment, they're very motivated as well. And so, I think my charge is just that, pick something and do it. And I think covenantal pluralism framework gives us a good lens by which to view how we might begin.
Thank you, Zeenat. I think, as a Muslim, you're hardwired to be optimistic from a faith-based lens.
Thank you.
But in terms of just looking and reflecting at the last year, I mean, the incredible response of faith-based communities working across lines of difference to respond to some of the greatest challenges of our time has been very inspiring, and it gives me a tremendous amount of hope. And unlocking that potential across the nation, and we're seeing stories from overseas as well, from the pandemic and from different countries. I think there's just a lot of things to look forward to.
For me, in our work, I probably point to Central Asia, specifically Uzbekistan, as one of the areas where it's been really encouraging. You're thinking about a country that was part of the former Soviet Union, and then afterwards it was under very strict authoritarian government for decades. And then all in the span of 3-4 years, it's almost completely turned around. And it's one of the 3 countries that's ever come off of the State Department's country of particular concern list. We were just there a few months ago, and the first Uzbek Bible has now been published, been translated and published. And so just really seeing that and how this approach of covenantal pluralism, they've really bought into. So not the kind of name, blame, and shame, seeing how you guys are not doing this right, you have to do it this way, but rather this is the end state. And they say, yeah, we agree. This is what we want to work towards, because Uzbekistan was historically the crossroads of civilization and a center of Islamic scientific innovation and theological scholarship, and that's a legacy that they want to rediscover and to promote. So and that benefits all groups in the country. So that's been really encouraging to see.
Well, I've had an opportunity to work with so many of you over the years when I was directing the Religious Freedom Caucus in the US Congress, and we constantly were responding to cases of persecution, and then I decided to start Hardwired because I wanted to get on the ground with you and really go into these countries and help you advocate and just really deal with the root causes of this conflict so people could find freedom. And last year I published a children's book called The Peaceful Garden, and it kind of, I was reminded of it as Zeenat was talking, because it was inspired by these two teachers from Iraq that went through my training that we teach them using analogies. So they ended up developing a lesson with their students where they took them all from the refugee camps to this garden in northern Iraq, and they said, look at this beautiful garden, now go and make a bouquet of flowers, but just don't choose this one color. So the kids went and they made bouquets of flowers, and they came back and they were so proud. And the teacher said, your bouquets are beautiful, but look back at the garden and see what happened. So the children looked back and they realized that they had really just destroyed the garden, and the only thing was left was this one little color, kind of just not looking so good. And the teacher said, well, this is what happened in our country when ISIS came in. They destroyed everyone except for the people that looked like them and believed like them. And in that moment, all of the children were very sad because they each, from their different religion and ethnic backgrounds, had experienced that destruction. And the teacher said, well, do you want to live this way or do you prefer the other garden? They said, no, we like the other one better. And so they gave them a packet of seeds, and they said, now go back and plant the garden together. And so they did. Over the course of a few months, the teachers taught them about this idea of covenantal pluralism and freedom of conscience and belief, and broke down their fears and misconceptions. And they gathered back at the garden. It was beautiful. And the teacher said, what did you learn? And this one Yazidi boy said, well, I thought all Muslims were like ISIS, and then I met this other refugee, and he was persecuted just like me. And I realized that we're the same. And they began to break down their barriers and see the humanity in one another. And another child said, look, we know that peace is hard and freedom is hard, but we don't want to go back. And you've given us these seeds to plant the seeds of peace and freedom and hope for our future. And I think that story really embodies this idea of covenantal pluralism. Regardless of whether we agree or not, we can all treat one another with dignity and respect. And those are the seeds that we've been planting through our education work and with the support of the Templeton Religion Trust for several years now in Iraq. And that gives me hope, because if we can do it there, we can do it everywhere, even here.
That's right. So, lightning round. Last comment.
Just, Tina, I'm inspired. I want a copy of your book. My 6-year-old's in the audience, so we're going to buy it for her. But I just want to plug also that this was a lightning round of a panel, but tomorrow at 3:15, you can have an opportunity to learn how you work with foundations and funders like Templeton Religion Trust. It's being chaired by my colleague, Dr. Allison Ralph. And so it'll be in the program booklet. But I would say if you want to know more about how you work with philanthropy to do this work, please attend that session.
Yes, to buying that book. I would say to my peer funders that the work that's happening on the ground, bottom up, and in cases top down, just needs to be amplified and supported and resourced further. And so if there are other foundations and philanthropies that are interested in this work, there are different doors to enter this space and amplify the work that's happening. That's what.
Yeah, if you want to find out more about covenantal pluralism, check out IGE's academic journal. It's called The Review of Faith and International Affairs. There's an article from Chris Seipel and Dennis Hoover about covenantal pluralism. Check it out. Thank you.
Well, and I just want to thank the Templeton Religion Trust and Eric for coordinating this amazing panel and allowing us the opportunity to share the inspiring stories of things that we get to do to really begin to mitigate conflict and help people find greater freedom and dignity, because all of us here have that same mission. So you can go to hardwireglobal.org to learn more about the children's books. I think tomorrow Kathy Ireland will be here, and she actually did a public reading of one of the books that you can find on our website. It's called Fruitopia. So yes, we use a lot of funny things, but I have a 6-year-old as well, and she likes it. So, and then my colleague Victoria Tigas is right up here in the front, and she'll be here all week to talk to you if you would like more information as well. But thank you.
Yeah, on behalf of all of our panel, thanks to the Templeton Religion Trust. And it's easy during this time with churches closed, mosques closed, synagogues attacked in the past year, to look only on the negative, and there's a lot of negative. But I've been inspired in part today, and I've been reminded, as Farhan said, that it was religious groups on the front lines fighting back during COVID to help people, to bear witness to their faith, bear witness against governments that were shutting them down and trying to throttle that, governments that were scapegoating people. And those are all important, heroic stories. I've read the books. Get the books as well and visit any of our booths, including the Religious Freedom Institute, out in the lobby. Would you help me in thanking our panelists?
Thank you.